Hey there, Independent Scientologists! Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the Theta Meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 8, episode 13. I'm here with Arthur Mudakis on Friday, middle of June, first day of summer U.S. in the Northern Hemisphere, first day of winter in our Southern Hemisphere in Australia and South Africa. So we are going to do a podcast on why is Scientology a religion? And Arthur came up with this one, so I'm gonna have him lead on it, and then I'll throw in my 2 cents as need be. So take it away.
All right. So this is my theory as to why Scientology is a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I notice is this word religion, because I don't know, I can't help but feel that this word religion isn't quite true in the sense, as far as one of the definitions, as far as a faith goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Christianity is a faith. Muslims have their faith. The Hindus have their faith, so on and so on. And so I see the word religion more as something you practice. It's something you do religiously, i.e. get up by the alarm clock religiously, study religiously. It's like a repeating, progressive act of some kind. But then when you throw faith into it, so in the sense of like a biblical faith, then one could say that you're a practicing Christian. So you do your prayers, you study the Bible, but you do it religiously. It's not the concept of Christianity that's actually the religion. It's how you approach your faith that makes you religious or not. So people can be Christian, but if they're not practicing religion or practicing religiously, then they're only getting a small component of it. But then we look at
Well, I was gonna say to that point, when we live directly across the street from a church, and we always know when they're holding services, because they in the church has been there for over 100 years, 120 years.
Yep.
And we always know when there's services, because they ring the bell before the services start, and they ring it about 15 minutes in for those running late to remind them, that type of thing. And people, I assume, I haven't gone over and said, hey, Al, what's going on? but I assume that they go in, and based off of other churches that I've been in the U.S., they go in and somebody talks to them about the viewpoints of that religion and says, this is what you should be doing. And they have Bible study and things like that on Wednesdays. So it's Sundays, Wednesdays, Fridays, the bells go off. Well, that's religious. Where Scientology, independent Scientology is, do you want to do a course? That's how it's a little bit different. It isn't you must do a course. It is buy a book. I'm talking about the corporate church, independent Scientology. It's download a free, original, unaltered version of the book from our website for free, and read it at your own leisure. Do a course when you can afford to do a course, or do a free course type of a thing. So that is a difference. But religiously, you practice something religiously. It doesn't necessarily require that you show up on Sundays. That isn't what makes you religious, is it? I mean, that's the way that it seems to me.
Well, I think it's the commitment towards progressing your faith system, whatever it may be. and
Yeah,
it's sticking to it.
Yeah, and forwarding your understanding of it.
That's right. Because then if we look at churches, because it's the church of Scientology, so Scientology is the subject, but then there's a church on top of it. And with a church, to set up a church, it's a tax-free enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And the way those kinds of enterprises work, especially with churches, the priest or the minister of the church gets looked after by the church. And then the church gets looked after by its public through donations. The church might be able to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So when you sign up to, say, the Church of Scientology, you sign up as a volunteer minister.
Mm-hmm.
And so legally, you're volunteering your time as a minister, working towards something for the community and something for the greater good. Because you can't just open a church willy-nilly. There's certain parameters that need to be met. But as far as a technically a church, if run correctly and offers its services to a community, doesn't pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And it can pay its ministers contribution-based, tax-free as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hear a lot of different things around, like other podcasts around the Church of Scientology and why is it a church? It's not a religion. They don't believe in gods. Blah 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 blah. But as a entrepreneurial enterprise, it's the perfect system.
Mm-hmm.
As far as money coming, money going, it's no different to somebody having a private trust or a private foundation. It's like you've got the Bill Gates Foundation, a tax-free enterprise, as long as they contribute something back to the community. And it could be a sausage sizzle. It could be, free courses around personal development. It could be anything. As long as the church is actively contributing to society somehow, technically the government and taxation officers will leave them alone and let them do their thing. But then in Ron Hubbard's case, it's a little different because the technology he was teaching was very compromising to other entities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, way back in 1954, when he was doing the Phoenix lectures, he directly said that Scientology is not a religion. And within
That's right.
4 years, it became obvious. And I think that this is one of the important points to make. There's a big difference between a religious philosophy and a religion. If you were to
being religious,
yeah. And the current corporate church, which arcs over to the what happened to Scientology thing, does an extremely poor job of being religious. I mean,
yes.
It's just not in the cards because of the way that things turned out for the corporate church and who owns them and Miscavige and his micromanaging and his inability to grant anybody beingness. It doesn't look like a religion in that wise, except from the viewpoint of you do what we tell you to do or you're out. That's right. The one thing.
That's right.
That's the one thing that makes it have some semblance or comparison to a religion in that wise. Otherwise, it's a religion from the viewpoint of, like many religions, you're dealing with a spirit, a soul, a thetan in our terms. Some religions do a better job of getting that across than others. That's why, to me, that's why it's religious. And a religion tries to help you be a better person and to others and to yourself, right?
100%. That's the intention anyway.
Yeah, that's the intention.
Regardless of what the religion is, even Anton LaVey, from the Satanic Church had the same intention.
Mm-hmm.
He managed to do it as well. He opened up a legitimate church.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting period around that period because all these kinds of things were going on. You had is it David Koresh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, was that his name? Koresh from
Yeah, Koresh.
the
Yeah, Waco.
Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you had all these things going on around that period. It was like a really interesting peak of humanity at that time with these real fundamental things popping up.
Mm-hmm.
But as a business enterprise, I don't think Ron Hubbard could have gone a more appropriate way as far as setting up a business structure, because I see it purely as a business structure
Yeah.
that allowed him a lot of freedom.
Yeah, it is. I mean, back it was in the early '60s that he dive, and we talked about this in the earlier portions of the What Happened to Scientology podcast. He stepped away from all of the corporate stuff for the church
Mm,
as early as the early 1960s, 62, 61, 63, something like that. And because he was worried about if they came after him, it would take out the whole kit and caboodle. So
yep.
he divested himself, which is the smartest thing he could have done, and it ultimately in the end, it was the nail in the coffin for his creation. I mean,
Yep.
and that's unfortunate, but did some of these other guys in history face the same thing, for their religions, as far as, like Martin Luther? He just, I mean, they went after him too.
From what I understand, yeah. I mean, my mate Jesus,
Yeah,
same
right.
kind
I
of
mean,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
It's somebody has a great idea and says, well, and I mean, let's go one further step. And let's
Okay.
say, is it religious or is it not religious? Because I think this is an interesting side rail. John
Okay.
Lennon, give peace a
Oh,
chance.
yep.
All you need
Yep.
is love. All of the things that he said, the bad sit in with the media and all of that, and getting his
Yeah,
message
yeah. He was
across.
good.
Right, right.
Yeah.
He really got it. Is that religious? To me it is. Is he trying to start a
I
religion? No.
oh, that's a really good question. How do you know he wasn't? Because we never saw his end.
Right.
He was only
He's
getting started
mhm.
before they shot him.
Yeah, he's in his
Um,
40s, if not late 30s this time around.
Sorry, John.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So that's something that needs to be looked at, is can you be religious without starting a religion? I
I
ca-
think
I
that
think
would
you
be
can.
an individual. Yeah. Yeah.
You're trying to get
I
across
know
things
I
for
have.
mankind.
Well, yeah, and um, perhaps that's where it becomes like a greater thing. It's one thing, doing religious acts for yourself because you have to, versus doing something that contributes something to the greater good,
Because you want to.
because you want to. Yeah, yeah, very, very different.
and
Because even
and
John Lennon, like he did it through his music. And so
yeah.
if people took on board he was a very influential guy. So
Mm-hmm.
on one hand, it kind of makes sense, you know, if I was to think like the other team, it makes sense to put him out.
Yeah,
Why would you want a guy like that in the way?
right. Right. I've got a story I can tell about that. um I was working in Los Angeles in 1991 at a digital instrument musical rental company. Who was assigned The guy that owned it was a Scientologist. I was a Scientologist. We didn't just deal with Scientologists strictly, but I had a opportunity to hire some people to work for me because things were picking up with the business, and I ended up putting an ad somewhere for Scientologists, and the piano player Nikki Hopkins, who played with the Stones, Lennon, I mean, lots and lots of big names. His ex-wife
Sure.
came and applied for a job, and we were
Mm,
talking, and she told me a story. I don't know what degree of separation it was, but she told me a story. This was December 8th, 1980, when Lennon was shot, that Yoko said she was going to go call the two people that needed to know most, which would have been based off of, from what I understand, she was there and Nikki was there, both of them were there, and she went in the other room. She didn't close the door, and Julian and Paul didn't get a call from her, but she got on the phone and she said, "It's done."
Mm. Mm.
This
It wouldn't
is,
surprise me.
and I thought, well, if that's the case, I can't prove or disprove it. But she said, it was that was the way that it seemed, and they all, I mean, the whole, it's become an expression of he got yokoed. She
Or if a
was
band breaks up, they've got a Yoko.
yeah, they've got a Yoko, right? So that's she was his handler type of a thing.
Yep.
But anyway, just an interesting aside through a Scientologist's eyes. I didn't end up hiring her for the job, but it was an interesting story nonetheless. And people did try to get John Lennon interested in Scientology, and he was not interested. I know that on 1 degree of separation, he was not interested in it, and it was my understanding that Yoko was the reason. That's
I wonder how he would have gone as part of Scientology. I mean, it was kind of his own creation, really.
Yeah,
I think it'd be a hard one to bend in a sense, or to try to educate.
So. Yeah, he's a bit of a Matterhorn on an OCA. He's hard to teach.
But he was very switched on at the same time.
At the same time. So you just got to let him do what he does. But obviously, he was very PTS at the same time. He wasn't in good health. The policeman that put him in the car said that he was very thin and gaunt and underweight. So, and there's a great series on Apple TV about the guy that shot him, and that he was never ever tried for the murder. Great series. Time, place, form, and event, and how strange. And it's amazing that they found a lot of these people that were involved, the first responders and all that stuff, that they're still around, and how struck they were about why would you kill somebody like that? I mean, it was tantamount to being Martin Luther King. And that's an interesting question too. Was Martin Luther King I mean, he was a doctor and he was religious, but was he starting a religious movement? When does it go from religion to waking people up and switching people on to things? Is that a religious thing? And to me, I've never felt that Scientology was a religion. I've always felt that it was a religious philosophy.
Yeah. I don't see it, because I mean, I suppose, on one hand, Scientology teaches you how to know something, and then a lot of the main religious faiths and principles have a different aspect on. I mean, it's not factual; it's faith based in a sense, and you'll get the facts when you pass over, which makes it really difficult while you're alive.
Yeah. Just believe us. Just go with it. It'll be fine. You'll find out later at the end of the movie.
Pretty much. But outside of that, the principles a lot of these faiths teach are actually really healthy.
There's a lot of good data
when approached appropriately. And I actually find there's a lot of similarities from things I've learned through Scientology and the Bible. In a sense, I see a lot of similarities, just differently spoken.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the thing that Ron was great at, was pulling from here, pulling from there, pulling from this, and he would distill this stuff down and work it together and see how these things go in the proper sequence to get, and his ability to get somebody to understand it. And sometimes he'd
Yes.
have to explain it 5 different ways, but I'd rather have it explained to me 5 different ways and take an hour and a half to do it than I would to have it said in some cryptic way that almost reminds me of something Shakespearean, and going, what does this mean to you? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
know,
Yeah. There's no question marks.
yeah.
There's an end result. There's a confirmed result. There's even if that result is simply not knowing, it's still a result of some kind.
Yeah. It's something what do we learn from all of this? And you can go off and say, okay, I'm going to try this. Hey, it worked, or it didn't work.
Yeah. That's right.
Instead of interpreting something, and that's the thing, is that you can just see the powers that be. They're like, so what did you find out about this Scientology stuff? And Ingo Swann, he says to Ingo Swann, he goes, oh yeah, it works, and I was able to go exterior and all this stuff. And what does that Scientology word mean? It means knowing how to know. Oh, we can't have that. We got to do something about this. We can't have people knowing about us. That's but Catholicism, yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's it. You never really get what's going on. It seems like it's good. People are happy with it, but yeah, we'll let that one slide. The Scientology thing's got to go.
Yeah.
So, calling it a religion is almost a radical act in and of itself. And then they in 96 with the IRS, they say, well, we beat the IRS and all this stuff. No, they didn't beat the IRS. The IRS became them. And then when you try to go get your whatever your donations are paid and everything, it's just smoke and mirrors. You don't get to deduct your auditing. It's just a small amount that you get to deduct. Nothing really changed.
Yep.
So, and it's one of the only religions that's a non-taxable religion in the United States. So,
well, most churches are. That's the whole idea of having a foundation, because it's pretty much a religious foundation. The building is the church, the place where people can come together to worship or study or whatever. And there's multiple of those all over the world. But deep to its core, it's actually just a foundation, a private foundation of some kind, or a public foundation even. They operate exactly the same. Because even just looking at this word church, a building used for public Christian worship. Really simple. But then when we look at the derivative, where are we? So it's from the Greek, so it's in brackets house, Lord's house, or master or Lord. So it's somebody. So it's one entity that has this church, this house of some kind where people can come to. So I suppose in a sense of even this with Scientology, there's a master, Master Ron, who had his house full of volunteer ministers who could get paid from the church for their service, and legally they're allowed to get paid for it.
Yeah, well, volunteer ministers don't get paid. Volunteer ministers don't see a dime. They don't see a dime.
Yeah.
Staff members hardly see anything. They're struggling even today with their alteration to the concept of ideal org. They're struggling because but the church gets it all and they get the scraps. And I was going to say, what is the definition of Lord?
Okay,
because that goes back to medieval times. A lord, it was somebody who owned a piece of land, and anybody who lived on it was under the lord.
Okay. Okay, so a man of noble rank or high office, a noble man or nobleman, act in superior and domineering manner towards someone. That's interesting. Okay, let's see. So it's like a ward. Old English, Halford from Halfweed, a bread keeper, and then from Germanic, loaf, ward, compare with lady. I'm not quite understanding that one.
So in other words, it came from the person who was allowing you to survive because they had the tools, the
Had the bread.
infrastructure in order
Yeah.
to feed you. So therefore, you were subservient to these people because you had to be in order to survive, or you froze to death.
Yep. Interesting. Okay, so we've got a feudal superior, especially the owner of a manor or a house, a master or ruler, a name of God, a name for God or Christ.
It's interesting
Like
how
a
that
house of lords.
poses over to from the magnitude of a guy who owns some property and has a nice house to the man in the sky who oversees everything.
And like a lot of these words, like religion, how it all has something to do with, a God. And it's like you say, it's interesting how these words have adopted these religious faith
Overtones. Yeah.
principles.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they're just like, oh yeah, let's just chuck it on. Yeah, let's just chuck it on there. Let's just chuck it on there. Let's just chuck it on there. When in essence, Christianity is a faith system. It's one's personal belief. Here's the material, believe it or not. It's entirely up to you.
Yeah. And
Um,
the difference between that and between affinity, reality, communication, and understanding. You say, okay, these are the basic
a recipe.
components. Yeah, the basic components of life is ARC and KRC, knowledge, responsibility, and control. And if you communicate with somebody, you can get in communication with them with communication. You can reality, affinity, and or understanding if you're lucky. And you look at that and you look at the mechanics of it, and that's the thing with that I see with Scientology that a faith-based religion doesn't have it for the most part, whereas in Christianity, Catholicism, you do unto others as you would have done unto you. Primary tenet in Scientology as well. That's sort of that's a mechanic, but how many mechanics do you see in most religions? You don't. It's just believe it or you're not one of us. Scientology, the church says believe it. The corporate church says believe it or you're not one of us. If you do anything other than what we want you to do, you won't be one of us. It's enforced on the CDEI scale: curious, desired, enforced, inhibited, known, refused. As a religion, it is enforced. In Catholicism, is it enforced? You can go. Somebody can go out and bugger their brother-in-law, and still remain within the religion. In Scientology, if you do that, chances are you won't be there long.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So where does the religion part come in? Scientology, the subject, and Scientology, the corporation, two entirely different things. So it seems to me that in a lot of cases, a religion is believe it or not, and you screwed up. Everybody screws up. Devil was in you that day, and 3 Hail Marys, and this and that, and okay, and you're good. Scientology.
Well, technically, when it comes to those things, there is an element of repentance.
Yes.
And repentance is quite a strong topic because it takes a lot of responsibility, right? And a lot of people in the category that you're talking about, they do a half-assed repentance. Yeah, I messed up. It won't happen again. But for somebody to truly repent their wrongdoing takes a lot of personal responsibility to do it as it's actually written. and to do it properly.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where if one was to repent, they don't punish themselves, but they acknowledge what they've done wrong, and they'll do everything in their personal power to never engage with that again. They'll apologize to who they need to apologize, make amends, and do whatever it takes to properly repent. But then in the case that you're saying, just do a few Hail Marys on your way. See you next week.
Yeah. I mean, it's up to the
It's
individual.
bastardized.
Yeah. And in within the ethics tech in Scientology, or as people would say, the doctrines, doing conditions and doing a liability condition is our version of repenting, making up the damages.
That's right.
For what you've done. It's not that dissimilar, but again, it is a methodology, and there is a formula, there is a set of mechanics that you have to do, and that is something that you don't see in most religions as a compare and contrast. I'm not trying I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to say that Scientology, the subject, is a religion or it isn't. It's more of a compare and contrast, and you look at these things, and it's, I mean, the corporate church says you're in a condition of enemy. Do the conditions, submit them, and we'll let you know whether we agree with you or not. That's not how ethics was supposed to work for LRH in most circumstances. I mean, he did get that way when he was under a lot of pressure for a period of time. But he also says that ethics is a personal thing. And that's the thing, is that I think it hinges a lot more on the person that's using it and their interpretation of it from a puritanical or purity viewpoint. You can take any information and you, like you said, you can use it half-heartedly, or you can take responsibility and put on your big boy or girl pants and go out and fix whatever it is that you've done, or do lots of good things for people because you want to and nobody else told you to. But when somebody says, well, you've got to do this if you want to get in heaven, and I have to do this stuff, you're not really being religious yourself. You're just looking out for yourself because you don't want to go to hell. That's a big difference. So I think whether Scientology is a religion or not depends upon the person using it and how they apply it, LRH says, this stuff isn't open for interpretation. I totally get that, because it's a mechanics-based philosophy. If you do these things, and it's true, if you do the things that he says to do, and you do them the way you're supposed to do them, the way that he says, you're going to get a desired result. I've yet to see somebody who just had faith that they ascended the tower of abilities and awareness and responsibility and everything. Maybe there have been. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. Even if we go back to the communication course, you're practicing, you're role playing, you're ingraining the concepts, you're becoming the ideas, and you're becoming the procedure, as opposed to, look, just be nice to one another, and don't be an asshole, and you'll be fine.
Right. Right. And
don't look at your neighbor's wife and it's all hunky-dory.
Right. And the choir buys, well, shit happens, and we'll send them to another country. So
yes, it's interesting. So, John, is Scientology a religion?
Well, I think it needs to be left to the person as to whether they apply something religiously. Do I apply Scientology? And I hate to say this, do I apply Scientology religiously? Yes, I do. I try to apply it to everything in my life, and I think with it 24/7, 365. Do I throw ethics conditions at people and everything? No, I don't. We don't, as an organization. Here's the conditions. Figure out what your condition is, and we'll help you apply it. But we're not going to tell you what it is. That's not really religious. So, I mean, it's a case by case, instance by instance sort of thing. And I tend to want to go with the subject of Scientology is a religious philosophy. You can choose to apply it or you can not choose to apply it. It's a personal thing, just like, ethics is a personal thing. A religion
Yep.
is sort of an ethical viewpoint.
Yep.
To me.
And it can be interpreted in so many ways. I mean, there's scholars interpreting these materials to try and get an actual understanding of what was trying to be said, which is really interesting.
Right, to this day, and they keep coming up with scrolls from this place or that place,
yes.
And what is this? What does this all mean? And why is it so important? And here's the thing: to me is when they find these artifacts. Why is it so important that you have to interpret them? And I don't mean from one language to a next. What are they trying to say with this stuff? What, you don't already get that you should treat others the way you want to be treated?
Well, who knows? It's like, I'm still stuck on this word religion. I think it's the word that mucks it all up. And
yeah, it's
I think
almost
it's just
a
one of
dirty
those
word.
things. It is, yeah. It's a very misleading word, I believe.
Mm-hmm. You say religion, and there's an obligatory eye roll, is what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Say, yep. Oh God.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there's definitely an agenda towards religions at the moment as well. In that context.
Yeah, and I worry about. It is. I worry about how unreligious the younger generations are, and how much how much they're. I mean, well, it's on the internet. It must be true, sort of thing. I mean, and that's the thing to me. At the end of the day, I want to say that Scientology, the subject, is far more a science that has religious overtones because you're dealing with a spiritual being, but it's the mechanics of a spiritual being and how that spiritual being causes things to happen and life. I mean, you look at the Catholicism. Everything happens because the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost have some sort of an effect on you. Scientology is you are your own cause. If you're at the effect of something, it's because you decided to be the effect of it, and that doesn't mean that you should be a jerk to everybody, but it means that you are. And I think that's where it goes wrong with the corporate church is why people are so selfish, is because it's an I, me, mine thing, and they just don't get it. And that's to that degree. Some of the nicest people I've ever met weren't Scientologists. Yet there are some Scientologists that when I was younger, that I met who were, OTs, and I said, I want what he's having, or I want what she's having. But I can count those people on one hand. Whereas if I meet a Mormon family or something like that, they'll give me a room, they'll give me food, and you don't see that in corporate Scientology. You don't see that. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. You don't see that in independent Scientology 99.9% of the time. So you throw the baby out with the bathwater when you get into these absolutes. Is that something? Everything has things that it can offer as a subject. And if there is any kind of a religion, and I think that's where Hubbard excelled at, is because he saw all of these different schools of thought on things, whether it was study or it was executive issues, running an organization, whether it was especially the spiritual stuff and the nature of a spirit and the things that can go wrong with them in this universe, and defining these things with the axioms of Dianetics and Scientology. You don't see that sort of thing in any other religion, but there are other things where it's be kind to people. LRH doesn't mention a lot of times, he doesn't mention the word love. He mentions affinity. They're two different words.
which I have to say, I actually believe affinity is more appropriate than
in
love,
most cases.
because love
Yeah,
falls under affinity.
yeah,
Because
yeah. It's
even the definition of love isn't what it's the same. It's the same kind of thing as this word religion. Like it's an inconclusive,
yeah.
means this, means that, completely different. Um, and the way we use it is incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it's yeah,
you know, and the definitions of words and conceptual understanding and all of this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration on the whole thing, and I don't think that you can have any
yeah,
kind of a black and white thinking of it. And you can't say that
mm,
Scientology, the subject, is a religion. I don't think that you can say that it isn't. It's,
yep.
you know, it depends on what
It's
it
the
is for you.
individual.
Right. What's true for you
Yep,
is true for you. And
yep,
do I want to go to Sunday services and stuff like that? No. Do I see the value of Sunday services? When I went to Sunday services in RLDS church, a dozen and a half times, I was like, you know what? I get it. I get it.
yep, yep,
You go in and you're in a room full of people and you've got data and you're agreeing on this data and you're seeing the value of it, and you walk out and you go, hey, I feel better.
yeah, yeah,
You do that once
yep,
or twice a week, 3 times a week or something like that, depending on how interested you are and what's available to you. If it works for you and it makes you feel better and you can get through life more efficiently and in a far more uptoned state, keep doing it.
pretty
Keep
much,
doing it.
pretty much.
I don't, I've thought about doing Sunday services and stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, let's listen to a lecture. This is what LRH says. Da, 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 da. I mean, our Sunday services are our podcasts almost.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
When you come down to, I
But I
just,
will say
go ahead.
it's a good idea. You should do something like that, actually.
Yeah, I've thought about getting,
Yeah,
having a Zoom call where, all people doing services and stuff are welcome to come. I mean, you can't make it mandatory. You can kind of
no,
go, you ought to come, and that's about as far as you can take it. But when you do that sort of a thing and you create a third dynamic where there's a group and you're, I mean, you can't have, what did you call it? A sausage sizzle on Zoom, I mean, I
yeah,
guess you could, and
yep, yep,
everybody
yep,
was
yep.
doing their own sausage sizzle. You could. Um,
Uh,
you're missing out on the smell of the sausage, except in your
yeah.
own place, and the sausage is very popular in South Africa. Uh, Unfortunately, all of our public are somewhere else other than in South Africa. Um,
Mm,
it's cool to have that, and it's something that can be easily overlooked, that the third dynamic in the group and that we're all of the same viewpoint, and that's something that you saw was really just pulled apart and taken out when Miscavige took over in the church. Is, man, people used to be outside talking about it, smoking a cigarette, having a cup of coffee,
yes,
and it
yeah,
and when the bad guys got into the church and everything like that, it was no verbal tech. You can't talk about Scientology.
yeah,
It's just what
yeah,
LRH says. And that is where the beginning of the end started, is when people couldn't
yeah,
talk about their quote unquote religious beliefs.
yes, yes.
They did the same thing to
Interesting.
Martin Luther too. Every religion has had that moment where it was like, hey, you got to knock this stuff off. I mean, look what the Jews received
That's right.
in Germany. Hey, not only can you not talk
That's right.
about it, you can't live it. So,
That's right.
this history keeps repeating itself on this, and the same thing has happened to Scientology, more so for the almighty buck than it has anything
Yeah,
else. And I think that that's what scares the people that took the church over, is because it has a religious aspect to it that if people really did apply it, they would be a threat.
yeah, yep.
Knowing
And
how
it's
to know.
interesting because even, yeah, exactly, knowing how to know. And it's interesting even listening to, stuff that I can find on YouTube around people that were around that period, and then left the church in the 80s, and then went independently. And when they talk about that time period when Ron was running it, they say it with such enthusiasm and such joy.
Yeah, it was great.
They talk about having parties and mingling, and
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them make the claim that it was actually more spiritually inclined
Mm-hmm.
during that period than it is now, where it's more corporate, as you say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Um,
my recall of it when I was a kid and what I did last lifetime. I mean, I miss that aspect of it so
mm,
much. How cool
yep,
people were. I mean, they were just. I mean, you just don't see that anymore
yep,
in a
yep,
third dynamic group type of thing, because it was everywhere. I mean, I was around Scientologists all the time, and they were cool. They treated me
mm,
like I wasn't a little kid. They treated me like a person. Their communication cycle was good.
mm, mm,
I mean, on and on and on and on and on. And it was such a magical time. And even, last lifetime, it was even more of magical, because you were around this group and this guy that were coming up with these crazy things that were so far ahead of their time. It was
yep,
absurd, the stuff that was going on and the abilities that people had in the 50s, that LRH was trying to find a better route to clear. And where is he going to be next month, and what city is he in, and you want to make
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
want
yeah,
to make a road trip to go see this ACC. It's kind of expensive, but man, the things I've been hearing about, and there's
yeah,
this
yeah,
buzz. And now that he's off doing something else and somebody's got a chokehold on it, it's like a graveyard. It's
yeah,
very,
yeah,
very odd. And to that degree, it must have been a very exciting time, with and I've been mentioning him a lot, with Martin Luther, who was saying, look, you guys are really abusing this subject. You need,
hmm,
this is not okay. And that,
yeah. You need
the
to relax a little.
yeah, the Reformation was an
Yeah,
important point. And that is, to me, that is what we are experiencing. We are experiencing a Reformation.
mm,
We have to return it to the way that it was. And that makes it, strangely enough, makes it more religious, to where you let people
yep,
be their own person and everything, and breathe it and experience it, and help them understand it and get it right. Because if you do, it has a tremendous amount to offer. So that, to that degree, it
yep,
is religious. I think it's become a lot less religious over the last 40 years, since Miscavige and company and the IRS took over. But
yeah, sure, sure.
it is what you make it in the end.
Yeah, yep. So I'm going to conclude. I
All right.
think, from my personal perspective, it's a full business structure
Mm-hmm.
that works really well and has its benefits. But I also like your approach as well. It's an individual perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It can be both. It's a matter of viewpoint.
Mm,
It's a matter of viewpoint.
yep.
I mean, all I do is deliver Scientology all the time. And my viewpoint is that it's a religious philosophy, and it's not a religion. Mainly
Yes.
because of what
Yes.
you said, that the word religion has a connotation. It's a dirty word.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
that makes people relax a little and drop their shoulders and go, okay, I like that philosophy aspect to it. That makes it sound like I have some self-determinism. Okay, good.
Yep.
Look
Yep.
into it, but don't look at the actions of some corporation that says that there's something, where they can't even publish books anymore that say by the author that actually did it. They just say L. Ron Hubbard. They don't say by L. Ron Hubbard, because they can't, because it's not by L. Ron Hubbard what's in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Or based on the works of Ron Hubbard,
Yeah.
or his name may not even be on there.
Right. One of those
Yeah.
three things. So that's not what you want. You want the real deal, and use it. And if it works for you, then you've got something,
Yep.
that means something to you and can help you and yours. So
That's right.
we're pretty
right.
close to an hour on this one, but I think we've gotten to our conclusion that it is what you want it to be, and you can be self-determined over what it is, and a religion is only really a religion, which is weird, whether a government is signed off on it or not, and they can take money away from them. Is that a religion? Do you have a religious tax exemption? Okay, then you are a religious body. They don't have any say in it. I mean, you look at that whole, we're the authorities. Well, who made you the authority?
Yeah. Now, I'm not 100% and I'm not completely certain, but I'm sure to set something up like that, I don't think religion would be used, because it's a legal thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure in Black's law it'd be described or explained in another way. And you know what? I'm gonna find out.
Mm-hmm.
I'll find out just out of curiosity.
Well,
To
I do
set up
know
a
that,
church.
yeah, the Bible says that you do not mix government and God. It is very, very straight on that.
Yes.
And that's what, to me, makes it very interesting is, wait a minute. I mean, you listen to the one nation under God, indivisible, and you can't mix the two. You
But it's
can't mix.
incorrect. It's
Yeah,
incorrect.
it is.
Because there's a concept of existing in the public or existing in the private.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're existing in the public, then you're bound by whatever your country's common law is.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're existing in the private, then you're existing under God, as in a human being that doesn't have a corporate name.
Right, and
very different.
that's exactly where I was headed. Was in the United States, when you get a letter from the IRS, it's all capital letters, which means they're
That's
addressing
right.
the corporation. They're not
That's
addressing
right.
the natural citizen
Or the human being, because it's interesting, because human being is
Mm-hmm.
not a legal entity. You can't be persecuted as a human being, but you can be persecuted as a person,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting.
Right, but it takes and in the US, the IRS isn't part of the government. It isn't a government body. The Internal Revenue
That's right.
Service,
That's right.
and then you have a non-governmental entity signing off on whether something is a religion or not, and then you have the
That's
judicial
right.
system that is pursuing. Wait, what? How does all this work? I mean, it's just, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit, is what it is.
Yeah, well, that too.
That's why the quote unquote religion of Scientology was persecuted, because it allowed people to think with this stuff and go, these are out points and I can't think with these things. You guys are lying to me. Uh-oh, we got to take these guys out.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, and really, Ron was pretty cheeky and he was very
Yeah.
clever.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if he tried to go the private route and take as many people with him as he could, to create human beings, not persons.
Not persons, right? And
Yeah.
he was
And
very
Malcolm X
vehement.
was similar.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm X wanted to create his own country,
Mm-hmm.
for black people.
Mm-hmm.
Look what happened to him. Similar thing.
It's a long list of anybody that wants to buck the system of control, and that's the fine line between what's a religion and what's a government. And some would say that some governments behave more like religions than they do governments, and vice versa. Scientology has become a government institution. Literally, it's become a government institution once removed because of the factors of the IRS, because they govern over their parishioners. It's weird. I mean, you really have to look at this.
It is weird. And most of the law is based on the Bible anyway.
Yeah.
But same thing. It's just been distorted and twisted, and the Queen walks around with the King James Bible,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
She's not
it's
walking
very
around with the
odd.
New Testament.
Yeah, well, she was walking around, I should say. No, that's
Right.
right. Or the Good News Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. So the line is blurred on a lot of things here. And I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to tell people is think for yourself. And
Yep, yep,
if it works and you can use it because it works. And
yep.
look for yourself and do
Yep.
your due diligence and whatever, and because it's just a label. You put the label on it that works for you, and you'll be fine. Think for yourself. Don't let somebody else think for you. You don't need to follow somebody or something else. You need to, if anything, you just need to follow your own knowingness, and you'll do fine.
Pretty much. And if you don't know, endeavor to find out.
Yeah.
And it's surprising. It won't take you long to find something out if you choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Some things might take you a while, but most things you'll resolve in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. You just got to
if
have
you're
an
unsure.
accurate source.
Yeah, which can be really difficult at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, buy yourself a really old set of encyclopedias.
Right. And yeah, and dictionary or dictionaries.
And dictionaries, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Which
definitely.
brings us back to what we were saying yesterday. So, well, I
Yeah.
hope everybody's enjoyed this, and there's a lot to consider and everything like that. It's a nebulous subject, and there's a lot of time, place, form, and event, and facts, and how things got changed, and all of that. But source is source, and don't take anything for the gospel. I'm being cheeky. Don't take anything for gospel until you've done your own research on it and used it, and then go from there. I think is where that leaves us. Religions
I
are
think
only
so.
as good as they
Yeah,
work.
that's right. Don't take anybody else's word.
Yeah.
Endeavor to find out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thanks
Because it
for.
was never an apple, just saying.
Yeah. That's right. It was never an apple. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Uh-huh. So true. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
being here,
Thank you,
Arthur.
John.
I enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. And we'll see everybody next week for another podcast. We'll come up with a topic, and we will get the What Happened to Scientology podcast out to bookend that whole thing. The outcome is going to be far beyond what our listeners think it is, and there's a very good reason for it. So have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And I'll
Yeah.
see you all next week along with Arthur. Take care. Namaste, and we love you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.